Okay, a very good afternoon, everyone. Very good morning, evening, wherever you are in the world. My name is Leila Shukroun. I'm Professor of International Law, and I'm also the theme lead of the theme Labor and Human Rights in the Blue Governance Center. We're delighted to welcome you today for yet a new fascinating seminar, Blue Horizon seminar, on a very current topic, women in fisheries, with three wonderful panelists and two co-chairs who are going to address questions that are extremely current and important in today's world, and question the Center for Blue Governance pays a lot of attention to. Professor Faye could not make it today, so he conveys his best wishes to the panelists and the chairs of this panel. That's just all what I wanted to say. Without further ado, I'm going to give the floor to the chairs and the panelists for a wonderful session and certainly lots of questions. Thank you so much and have a wonderful session.
Thank you very much, Leila. Hello, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are. I'm Stella Tsani. I'm an associate professor in economics at the Department of Economics at the National and Kapodistrian University of Athens, Greece. I feel extremely happy and privileged to join this team of women to discuss today a very interesting topic with dire and direct connections to female inclusion and well-being around the globe. Today we focus on the engagement of women in fisheries, a topic probably not very well explored, but as we will discuss in a couple of minutes, with many direct implications for female inclusion, female incomes, female active participation in economic activities around the globe. Allow me to give a brief introduction of who is who in this virtual room. Apart from me, Jennifer G., lead of the gender team and the Fisheries and Aquaculture division of FAO. I'm happy and privileged again to mention it that together with Jennifer, we are co-chairing today's seminar. And we are happy to share the rest of this hour with our panelists, Hannah Bishash, Director of Southern Europe at Clearwater Seafoods Internationals. She is a sales and business development expert. We've got Dr. Bernice McLean, Senior Program Officer, Industrialization Blue Economy Program Lead at AUDA NIPAD, and Raisa Mohammed, Director of Blue Economy at the Ministry of Fisheries and Blue Economy in Somalia. Only women in our panel today with lots of interesting things and insights on the role of women in fisheries. For us in Athens, at the University of Athens, women are a matter of active research interest and engagement, constant engagement that has to do with the understanding of the barriers that impede women from being an active ingredient and segment of the economy, whether it's in terms of income generation, innovation, equal representation and inclusion in socioeconomic activities. Currently at the Department of Economics, we have several projects that look into the policies and to the economic tools and reforms that are required so as to remove all those barriers, whether social, economic, legal, cultural, that impede women from entering the labor market and for being an active part of it. We focus mainly on the Mediterranean region and mainly on energy-related activities, yet we came to realize that when we talk about offshore economic activities, we cannot discuss or we cannot disregard the active participation of women in what is called blue economy, including the fishing sector. From our research, what we have found to date is that some very well-established approaches, think for instance, subsidies or taxation, are things that impede women from entering the labor market, not to mention social norms, not to mention family planning, things that seem to have a direct impact on the decisions of women to be economically active. Focusing on the fishing sectors, what is really striking from our work is that we tend to refer too often to fishermen. while in reality, fishers, like farmers, are not just men. We see and we have data that show that 1 million of women around the world work either in a paid or unpaid form in the fishery sectors. And although women are mainly involved in the tasks that come before and after the fish is hauled or out of the water, they may also be there for the catch or the harvest. At the artisanal level, women are very much engaged in the preparatory work that includes making and mending nets, baskets, pots, biting hooks, or providing services that have to do with the fishing boats. Also, we see a lot of female engagement in the packaging and in the trading support services. What is striking from our research to date is that although women account for almost 50% of the workforce in the fisheries and the aquaculture sector in general, when, of course, the secondary elements such as the processing and trading are included, a lot of this female engagement is not recorded and not even paid for. And yet, what is an additional factor that seems to be very striking from our research is that this female engagement comes with a direct economic impact that has to do not only with income generation, but it has to do with access to food and to good quality food, high protein food being related to fish. This is quite important for the developing countries that face the challenges of engaging women in economic activities and in profiting, benefiting from these activities in an equal manner. So keeping in mind that we are globally now under a sustainability transition, a key point that we are trying to understand with the work that we do at the Department of Economics is what are those policies that need to be put in place so as to encourage greater female inclusion in all the economic activities, including fishing, and also what are those interventions that need to be made, socioeconomic and policy interventions that should be made in order to ensure that women get greater engagement, but also paid recorded engagement. And in the end of the day, how this greater female participation in the fishing sector links to sustainable development goals that have to do not only with poverty reduction or access to food and nutrition security, but have to do with providing equal opportunities and providing opportunities that are related not just to income generation, but also to innovation, to sustainable management of the environment, to developing innovative approaches to food production, etc. Hopefully in this session, in this meeting, we will have some insights on these matters. I'm personally very happy to be here, and I'm waiting forward to hear from the experts in the panels their views on these topics. So with no further delay and giving the floor to the rest of the panelists, I pass the ball to Jennifer. Jennifer, the floor is yours.
Thanks so much, Stella, and greetings to everyone. So as Stella was mentioning, I am a fishery officer at the FAO, and I'm currently leading the small gender team that we have working for the Fisheries and Aquaculture Division, which is first for us. It's a fairly new team and new group. And so we're really pleased to be addressing these issues sort of from within a technical sphere. With the support of our corporate gender team, of course. So as has become tradition before I launch into the rest of my points, I just want to offer a little reminder for everybody at the seminar of a few key concepts. So we're sharing a common vocabulary as we discuss these issues. So the first point is the difference between sex and gender. So sex is a biological difference between men and women, and gender is a construct, is a social construct, which refers to our roles, activities, and responsibilities connected to being a female or a male in any given society. And I think the point that's very important to emphasize here is that gender roles are learned, they can change over time, and they have wide variations within and between cultures and should be analyzed as in the same way as other socioeconomic variables. And then when we're talking about gender equality, what we're talking about is the enjoyment of women and men of equal conditions, treatment, and opportunities for the realization of their potential in order for them to contribute to and benefit from economic, social, cultural, and political development. So this means that women's and men's rights, responsibilities, and opportunities do not depend on whether they're born male or female. And just another point along these lines that we don't expect that women and men have to be fulfilling the same roles or duties. It's that people have the opportunity to choose which roles they would like to fill themselves. And as we're running through these, just one other point really worth considering and keeping in mind as we talk about the work that we're doing, and I think particularly the work that we need to do in the future, is this concept of intersectionality. So intersectionality treats different social categories or identities, things such as race, class, and gender, which all create overlapping and interdependent systems of experience and/or disadvantage. So intersectional theory sheds light on the ways various vectors of identity, such as race and gender, impact one and another to form unique subjectivities and experiences for people. So this is to say that as we're saying, men and women, their experiences, we don't make any assumptions that, of course, the experiences of one woman are the same as another. And just kind of continuing this point of discussion. So this is a little highlight that's, of course, very important for us to consider and contemplate our own biases, beliefs, judgments, and practices. And those of our organizations as well, because we're all part of these larger structures today, and how considering ourselves within these, but also how the organizations shape our approaches. And so that's it. So of course, we're talking about women's participation in small-scale fisheries and small-scale aquaculture. We're not only talking about small scale, but this is the part of these two sectors where we do find most women engaged. And exactly as Stella was saying, that in spite of the fact that depending which part of the value chain you're looking at, the majority of women, the majority of the players are women, they are still faced with the fact that women are most likely to be involved in informal and low remunerative activities, making their contributions often recognized and undervalued. And so women's working conditions are also not equal to those of men. We find this quite consistently with studies around the world. So women tend to be engaged in irregular, informal, part-time, low-skilled, labor-intensive positions and are most vulnerable, both in terms of tenuous working conditions, but also in terms of being subject to different forms of gender-based violence. So in the secondary, to make a few examples, in the secondary sector, fewer women than men work for wages or salaries. So it's 60% of 60% of men versus 75% of women. Women account for 40% of all people working for pay in subsistence or small, like informally paid sectors of small-scale fisheries. And women are holding only about 15% of full-time positions in aquaculture and fisheries primary sectors, and 71% of the part-time jobs in processing. So as we're just running through very quickly, the main gender-based constraints that we see for women working in fishery and aquaculture value chains include exposure to financial insecurity with limited access to social protection schemes, less access to assets and resources, which are crucial to perform their daily activities. Women's activities are significantly less remunerative due to considerable time and technological constraints. Women's voice is not equally represented and is not included in fisheries management bodies and decision-making processes. And this we see from both local to national and at the international stage as well. Women also have higher care burden. So this, we're talking about the triple work burden. So women are faced with dealing with work duties outside the home, within the home, and also care duties. And so this is restricting severely the amount of time they're spending, they have to spend on other activities. So an example of this is, on average, globally, women spend 4.2 hours a day on unpaid domestic and care work, while men spend 1.9 hours. And the next point is, of course, that women's access to assets and resources lags significantly behind men's. So women don't have as good of access to extension services, water, for example, ownership of assets. And there's also, we found large gaps in terms of access to finance and digital technology. So as we're considering all of this, I think we're starting to set the stage quite clearly for the issues that women are facing throughout the value chain of fisheries and aquaculture. And another point that really worth keeping in mind is that generally discriminatory social norms and rules affecting women and girls are at the heart of gender inequality. So we really need to focus on increasing gender equality and women's empowerment to improve women's well-being. And these efforts towards empowerment of women also have strong co-benefits for productivity within the sectors, and also improving nutrition and dietary diversity for communities and households. And just an interesting point that came from a recent study released by FAO last fall is that policies are changing more quickly to better address women's challenges. So currently, 75% of policy documents studied globally addressed women's challenges. However, only 19% actually included policy goals related to gender. So we see there's also a gap, although there's an improvement in terms of directives, the inclusion of women and gender within legislative mechanisms. We're not still doing a very good job of making sure these are implemented in a concrete way. So with our work at FAO, we're generally pushing towards using gender transformative approaches. So these approaches actively strive to examine, question, and change rigid gender norms and the imbalance of power as a means of achieving development goals, as well as meeting gender-related objectives. These research, programmatic, and policy approaches challenge the distribution of resources and allocation of duties between men and women, and are really designed to be specific to the communities where the work is being developed, and also making sure that everybody in the community is involved. So it's not the type of mechanism that can be applied in a top-down manner. It has to be done quite slowly in iterative steps, making sure that the voices of everyone in the community, both men and women, girls and boys, are included and valued. So with that, I just am going to wrap up with a quick overview of the 4 objectives for gender equality within our work in the Fisheries and Aquaculture Division, which also aligns with the broader FAO gender policy. So in our work, we're striving to ensure that women and men throughout the value chains have equal voice and decision-making power, and no one is left behind. We're looking to ensure that there are equal rights, access to, and control over resources for women and men. Also equal rights and access to services, markets, and decent work. And finally, a reduction of women's work burden. So just referencing back to the triple work burden I just explained a few moments ago. So with those 4 objectives of our work, we really have a few calls to action. So despite the progress in gathering global sex disaggregated data in the fisheries and aquaculture primary sector, and some advancements with secondary sector as well, we really need to ask and focus on investments in high quality research and data disaggregated by sex, age, and other dimensions of social and economic differentiation. We need to make sure that we're intervening at appropriate scales using proven approaches, which include gender transformative approach. And interventions must be intentional and focus on empowerment through constructive processes. So keeping in mind this mantra, never for us, without us. So that's it for my little overview of the work we're doing at FAO. I'm happy to turn over to the panelists who will tell us some more detail about their work.
Thank you, Jennifer. I think it's my time to jump in. So hello everyone, my name is Hannah Deschache. I'm based in France. I work for one of the top Canadian vertically integrated company called Claywater. I've been working for the company for the last 16 years and randomly joined the seafood industry, which is one of the other topics that I think we need to discuss and to highlight is how can we bring more talent, more women within the industry of seafood, which is over the years I've been finding very interesting, exciting, and something that it's undervalued in the within the industry in general. As it comes to me, I work for a company which I was fortunate enough to, I know we've been sharing some challenges from my peers here, but there is also some companies involved in diversity inclusion and how they can promote women. And for instance, just to give you a bit of an example, so I myself have been working for the last 16 years for Claywater, but also in the seafood industry. I've been gaining more responsibilities and I've been being supported by the company through multiple actions, training, mentoring, coaching myself. And I was also a coach to some of my peers within the company. So there's a lot of activities or process that have been implemented to help and promote women within the company. But the challenge that we're also facing at Claywater is the lack of talents and how we can bring more women within the company as well. To me, honestly, like I said, the big challenge is how can we promote and how women can also grow within private companies. We tend to rely on others, but we also need to rely on ourselves too. So we shouldn't limit ourselves. We need to be engaging. We need to be resilient, and we also need to believe in our dreams and keep pushing and dream big. It could, it looks like, or it could sound like an unreal thing, but I really believe in that. So I think we need also to believe in ourselves, believe in the fact that this industry is regardless of the challenges that you've been saying and sharing, Jennifer, or even Stella earlier, there's also good things happening in our industry. And I think it's definitely, and we have our place as women to be part of within this. We have our role to play and to push within this industry. So yeah. I'll take any more questions related to my position, role, but the only thing I can say really is that we need to bring and increase awareness, visibility, not only of women, but also in the seafood industry in general versus the luxury industry versus the automotive industries versus other industries that are more sexier, than the seafood, to bring more women from top to bottom. And as you already said, one out of 2 workers are women, and this number is basically what we're also seeing at Claywater. And we have, from the vessels to the plants to the top management, middle management, we have brilliant women, and that only want to be part of this sector, and how not only we're talking gender and women in general, but also an economical valuable women industry, also consumers, and we're part of this topic more than ever, really. So diversity is key, and we have our role, and we and yeah, like I said, honestly, I don't want to. There are challenges, but also based on my experiences, there are also good things happening, and we should also need to express it, bring it, and to make sure we can attract talent, people, and especially women into this industry. I try to keep it short, but I'll let you, Bernice, to carry on.
Great, thanks very much, Hannah. I'm going to break the mold a little bit and do a short presentation just to contextualize where I'm coming from. So just to start, while I'm loading the screen, I am working for the African Union Development Agency, which is unfortunately called AUDA. NEPAD, and we are basically representing the development agency of the African Union, which is an intergovernmental entity for the African Union. So generally, we represent all of Africa's 55 member states. So looking at things from a specific governmental perspective, but really working a lot with other stakeholders, particularly non-state actors and experts to help with evidence-based decision making. Just as an individual, I've done my PhD in marine policy, looking at coastal policy development in South Africa and in Tanzania, specifically at policy windows of opportunity. So what are the opportunities that makes policy change, and how can we best get the agendas into these policy windows? So it serves as quite a good background to the job that I'm doing, which is looking at how to help support our member states and regional bodies to develop blue economy on the continent, with a specific focus at the moment on fisheries and aquaculture. That's where our blue economy in Africa has developed from a fisheries and aquaculture background and a integrated coastal management background. So we're now trying to help the member states to establish their policy frameworks in blue economy, while implementing priority projects and programs and doing sort of knowledge production for evidence-based decision making, etc. From the fisheries and aquaculture perspective, I'm going to just highlight the point that Hannah made on trying to make fisheries sexy. This is particularly important within Africa's blue economy development agenda, because we are seeing, the blue economy development has happened over the last few years, since 2018, and particularly for fisheries, but particularly for women within fisheries, there's a huge danger for increased marginalization. Fisheries itself as a sector within agriculture has never, I believe, never met its full potential in terms of visibility and value, and that's something that we continue to strive to help with. But particularly focusing on the gender aspects of a woman's involvement in fisheries and aquaculture, to try to look at the gender disaggregated information, which is still, we are getting better at it. So yeah, definitely highlight the successes, as Hannah says, but trying to strengthen the data collection methodologies, try to help member states to really look at where the gaps are in this and try to highlight these. So it's not just collecting the data, managing it, using it for evidence-based decision making, but really increasing the visibility and showcasing where the gaps are and where the policy attention is needed. So this just shows, this is from quite an old study. I put it up because it was a seminal study that actually also represented a partnership between the FAO and NEPAD at the time, really highlighting the value of African fisheries within the agricultural sector, and specifically looking at women's roles within this. And it was the first study that really highlighted the important role of women, and we're actually reproducing the study this year, again in partnership with FAO. It's been 10 years since we've done it, but we want to try to keep the momentum going, keep the visibility going. So this just shows that in fisheries and aquaculture, women make up more than a quarter of the total sector workforce. This is an informal workforce, although they participate most commonly through informal unpaid activities, which is limiting in terms of social protections and security. And I think this is something Jennifer spoke about also. The women's contribution to food security and livelihoods, etc., is extremely significant, but most often insufficiently recognized and definitely undervalued. We see that most participation is in the post-harvest sector as well, and that's the formal participation. Now, this is a study that I think everybody must know by now, the Illuminating Hidden Harvest study that the FAO did recently. It shows the the number of women anticipated in small-scale fisheries specifically. So you can see there a huge number of women, 5.3. 3 out of 10 people in general are in small-scale fisheries are women, and 46% again in the post-harvest. And then the lower figure just shows in terms of nutrition, you know, how much small-scale fisheries can contribute to nutrition on the continent. So yeah, 137 in terms of the intake of 4 critical nutrients, and then 36 million in terms of 6 critical nutrients. And this is very important in terms of, you know, obviously the overall health of a population and of youth development in terms of trying to address stunting, etc. In terms of the policy environment, just to mention that we have actually quite a significant number of policy documents that deal with gender as a continent, not just within fisheries and aquaculture. We have quite a good continental strategy that was relatively recent, that is a guiding document for all the programmatic approaches and frameworks and so on. And then specifically for fisheries and aquaculture, we have the policy framework and reform strategy, which has one of its key objectives as of gender mainstreaming. The blue economy strategy is also there. It mentions the importance of gender mainstreaming, but I think more can be done within these frameworks, and specifically within the implementation of them. I've included the continental free trade area there because that's a particularly important continental flagship program that's underway to try to improve trade on the continent. And because fisheries significantly contributes to the trade in aquatic species, and because a lot of the informal traders are women, it's important to mention it here. I'm not going to go through too much more detail, but just really to show that what we're trying to do as an institution is to improve evidence-based decision making, and this means doing a lot of studies and providing, you know, defensible peer-reviewed findings. This is one of the recent studies that we've done. It's on gender approaches to mainstreaming fisheries and aquaculture. It was released last year. And the intention was to try and review the position of women in fisheries and aquaculture and make recommendations from a foresight perspective. Now, the Sophia report, the state of fisheries and aquaculture, has just come out, and contextually it's very interesting for Africa specifically. We have about half of the global consumption levels of aquatic food products on the continent. I think it's 9.4, 9.6. Global average is 20 point something. We are anticipated to remain at these levels, although the production levels will increase by about 10%. The per capita consumption is likely to remain the same or even decrease. We're the only continent where it was anticipated to decrease because of our growing populations. Now, more importantly, if we do increase at the recommended 10% or the projected 10% levels on the continent, that means that we have to basically increase our production levels by 75% to maintain those current consumption levels. If we want to meet the global average, we have to increase by 200%. So, you know, we're facing huge contextual issues in the sector on the continent. And I think the role of women in the sector is particularly important because of the transformation aspect of trying to not just produce, well, to produce more aquatic products, but to produce the sufficient levels. And the actions on that are not only, you know, better management of fisheries and growth of aquaculture, but really looking at post-harvest processing, value addition, and trade, and that's where a lot of women are working. So it's a critical context that we have to take into consideration when we're looking at foresight work and what we need to do as a continent. These are just some of the findings of the study. really it speaks to the findings that Jennifer had from the global level, that women are undervalued and underrepresented in the data. But specifically in the informal fisheries and aquaculture sector, they risk being even further excluded from the business opportunities that are opening up from blue economy growth and from the continental free trade area. So unless we ensure a just transition within these processes, women fish processors and traders and those working in the aquatic foods industry will be worse off, basically. And then, so these are some of the recommendations. So access to finance and working capital is critical. There are, as Hannah mentioned, examples of good examples, and particularly here in terms of entrepreneurship from women. But these need to be highlighted further and need to really be taken up. And innovation and targeted interventions are going to be needed to bridge the gap to ensure access to finance and growth of small businesses. So the key recommendations from the study are to define gender equality strategies that are aligned with our policy documents, and to move from policy to operationalization using gender, the AU gender strategy. So this was a big one for us, is to establish a gender transformative program, which we're looking into, and then to build on existing institutional initiatives that we're doing through projects like our Fisheries Governance Project, which is to support non-state actor networks and platforms for women in fisheries, so that their voices are heard in regional and continental policy decisions. So let me end it there. It's a bit of a mouthful, but thanks very much for listening.
As Stella mentioned earlier, I'm Raisa Mohammed, the Director of Blue Economy at the Ministry of Fishery and Blue Economy of the Federal Government of Somalia. I'm Department Director of the Ministry, and my role as a Director of the Department, I'm responsible for providing and implementing the strategies and the policies regarding to the blue economy, but mainly coordination, because blue economy being a multi-sectoral activity, we also coordinate within the department with the line ministries, but also the stakeholders who are related to the blue economy. So yeah, and you know, sometimes when you listen like this discussion, is like you feel like all the problems are cross-cutting. No, because we are in diverse world, but what was mentioned in Geneva earlier, and all the findings are the same, and we don't have to be honest, something different from here.
Until the first comes in, may I address a comment or question basically to all of you that follows what I said in my introduction, like what is your view, or what are the outcomes of your work on the policies that could enable greater female engagement in the fishing sector? If any insights there, or any policy improvements, updates that could be brought forward for greater female inclusion in the sector. Yes, Leila, please.
If you don't mind. And thank you so much for your presentations, because I think they were all fascinating, very, very well informed, and showing different perspectives. Well, you know, coming from an international perspective and to some extent policy as well, what I see is that you might have excellent policies, but they're very often very difficult to implement. So my own perspective would be to have a very case-by-case approach. We have a colleague from the African Union, and probably you know what I allude to. You know, the African Union has excellent laws, excellent policies, but on the ground, they're really tricky to implement. So I was wondering whether you have examples from your own organization, be it the African Union, the FAO, or, you know, all organization, showing some sort of successful case studies and some sort of successful tools that you have used to implement a given policy.
And to add to this, Leila, if I may, You also have distinction between the fisheries and the aquaculture as well. It's different, regardless it's within the seafood industry. It's total different businesses kind of, and way of working as well. But at least from my perspective, as earlier said, but I think, you know, the company, the private company that I work for, at least we're putting some diversity policy, some coaching, some mentoring, some training, and also pushing and also going to schools, trying to bring in more talent, some women to the team, to the company. And I think also really from our perspective, from where I sit, yeah, it's difficult to I think the challenge we're also having, not only to empower women, is also to bring them along within the industry, in our industry. And I think, you know, we can maybe leverage best practices from other industries as well, and how we can do those kind of campaign that can bring in that school, high school, primary schools, and really trying to engage and make the seafood industry as sexy as possible, but more visible, and made it aware to all the young ladies coming into you know, after uni, and I think we really underestimate the industry we are in, and yeah. But you also have companies which I believe are really playing the game and willing to bring in more women and to make it more visible. But yeah.
So I think I'm waiting for Jennifer to unmute, but I think I'll jump in quickly before she does that. Just to maybe say that one of the good examples, or the useful things that we've learned as the implementation agency for the African Union, is really to try to provide the enabling framework, enabling environment, and then to enable the different sectors of society to do their thing. So Hannah, you're talking about the private sector and all the things that you're doing, which is fantastic. You know, we're not very good at, as governments generally, in terms of partnering with private sector, understanding what is needed. But we're getting better at listening and at trying to provide the enabling environment. And certainly in Africa now, we're very conscious of the fact that around 90% of our private sector is made up of micro, small, medium enterprises. And in the fisheries and aquaculture sectors, you know, these are critical players. So what we're trying to do is to support initiatives that will help to increase the voice of the private sector, of non-state actors. And I mentioned in the slides that we're doing quite a bit of work to enable existing networks and strengthen existing networks of women fish processors and traders. There's one particular network called Our FishNet, which is scaling across the continent. And really, this was a bottom-up network that wanted to establish. So we just helped them to establish, and have given them recognition and space within the AU decision-making processes to be able to articulate their needs. What we have also noticed is that there's a very strong need for empowerment and capacity building. So you know, there's a lot of focus now on digitalization and on, you know, AI and so on. But you know, what we are facing is a greater digital divide, particularly among our low-income sectors, and particularly among women. So we have to have really targeted capacity development initiatives for women businesses, for those who are wanting to become more formalized and to take on the skills that are needed to grow their businesses and articulate their needs more, so that it's heard more by the decision makers. So that's one of the good examples that we're facing.
Thank you, Bernice. It seems that specific policies or initiatives that are crucial in ensuring sustainable inclusive growth for women in fisheries is a question that has also been risen in the chat. But what is the role that men can play, and in which level men can support the movements? That is a very nice question coming from Mauritia. So any views on these, ladies?
Sure, I can jump in quickly. I think that there's always space for men as allies in this type of work. This is a lot of what's been emphasized, I would say, in the last 5 to 6 years of the work we're doing. This was also mentioned. Hannah and I were together part of this Women's Seafood Initiative, and this was part of the work and the conversations that were done. And I think that having some men as allies were really fundamental to even the establishment of WSI. However, that's not everything. That's not the only role. And I think one of the other points when we're talking about gender that's worth keeping in mind is when we say gender, it's not another way of saying women. We're not just talking about working with women. We're talking about men and women, and we're really talking actually about power dynamics. And this is what makes the world go round. This is what creates a lot of issues. But one of the really interesting pieces of work that we're starting to address is this work around positive masculinities. So working with different parts of the aquaculture and fisheries value chains. One example would be a very recent project that's dealing with fisheries that are off sea, so typically a more masculine domain. And working within that context, looking not just at safety at sea, but also how do we address and consider issues like safety at sea within the context of positive masculinities. So positive masculinities meaning ways in which men sort of, let's say, examine themselves and consider different ways of being that don't limit or restrict them into even, for example, more dangerous ways of working that don't consider safety regulations. So that's a bit of how we can do this with making sure men are included when we're talking about gender.
Thank you, Jennifer. And while we are expecting more questions in the chat box, any comments or thoughts on how female inclusion in the fishing sector and greater engagement connects to the sustainability transition and to the timely meeting of the sustainable development targets? Any views from the panel on this?
I can, sorry to go in again, but just very briefly and maybe leave a bit of space if Hannah wants to answer this too, and Bernice, but I think making sure women are well included, particularly considering this economic aspect, is crucial. We're losing a lot of potential if women are not being fully valued, if their work's not being properly remunerated. It's not good for anybody in terms of sustainability. But it's also really an interesting opportunity as we're looking at different ways to adapt to changing climate, but also improving practices, making sure that voices from communities are included. And so this includes the voices of women who have different experiences, different expertise to offer. And so that's another reason it's very important to make sure women's voices are included.
No, absolutely. I mean, I can only echo what you just said, Jennifer. At the end of the day, we're a part of society, so we have our part. And yeah, I mean, I just wanted to avoid repeating myself because we're so basically, but yeah, so no, like you said, Jennifer, is just we have our role and we have to be part of that, to be honest. So
yeah, maybe just to add also from the perspective of the social perspective, we basically make up half of the population. So in order to meet the sustainability goals, you can't exclude 50% of the population. But also the solutions need to be co-created and need to be co-developed, and not just the solutions, but the innovations and the opportunities going forward. So, I mean, I think there are many lessons of why policies fail or how policies fail by not being properly conceptualized, and that conceptualization process needs to consider all voices in it. and not just consider all voices, but basically make meaningful participation of all voices, and particularly give more space to the more marginalized sectors of the population to enable an accurate reflection of what's needed and how to address the issues. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you all, and I think this discussion connects very well to another very interesting comment coming from the field. Alison, a founder director of a fish processing factory in the UK. So Alison writes that listening to us, it seems that the theme of gender is discussed in the policy making level, but not filtering through into actionable outcomes. Is this gender washing? And more to add, gender roles are very cultural. In Scotland, the bulk of filleters would be female, but cross the border and they would be all men. What does the panel think about positive discrimination, maybe creating lines of finance in fisheries specifically for women? Thank you, Alison. Very, very nice comment here and thought-provoking. Any views on this?
Maybe because I spoke last, I can come in.
Please,
yeah, thanks so much. Point. I think, yeah, I mean, gender washing, you know, it could be gender washing. You have to have intentional policies and interventions in order to address something that's not changing by itself. And if the issue is identified as being an inherent issue, you have to have, you know, specific ways and intentional mechanisms to address it. You know, this is a kind of a cross-cutting issue. It's not necessarily gender, but it also goes to sort of affirmative action policies, and you know, there's a lot of debate both ways as to whether those work or they don't work. Whatever approach is taken, and whichever way you look at it, you know, you need to try to look at doing the least harm, being the most inclusive, and trying to look at the best possible outcome. From a policy perspective, we normally have a particular approach to identifying issues and taking through the planning process, which, you know, you look at the intention of what you want to do and you work backwards in terms of what the issues and the drivers and everything are, and then the activities. If that is done in a very inclusive way and an intentionally open way that allows for the voices of everybody to be heard, not just women, but everybody to be heard, then I think you're on a better wicket to address things in a more gender equality perspective or approach. So, I mean, in terms of, again, also in terms of culture, there are many different approaches to culture. Some cultures is mostly, you know, social constructs. Many cultures are can be, how do I say this diplomatically, can be non-inclusive and non-beneficial to certain sectors of society, whether it's young people, whether it's white people, whether it's, you know, women, whether it's men. So I think the societies have to decide where they want to go in terms of their development policies, what the gaps are, what the issues are, and try to address those in an intentional way that's least harmful and most beneficial for all concerned, to make sure that we're progressing as a society. We're not just stuck, doing the same old thing in the same old way and facing the same old issues. So that's a personal perspective, but yeah, over to others who might have a different perspective.
Thank you, Bernice. Lots of different directions to consider in addressing this question and the topic in general. One last comment, given the time that we are left, well, no time left, but I think the comment deserves attention because things may sometimes move into the opposite direction. So Michelle Frost says that now we may see diversification away from fishing because of overfishing and climate change. So what would be the real implications of this for men and women that already engage in fishing activities, in underpaid, non-paid activities? and underrepresented in the data. So maybe we can comment on this pessimistic vision, like what are the implications of overfishing and moving away from some economic activities simply because the planet can no longer deliver on this. So your views on this, ladies? Apart from the obvious that we need to all be prepared for the next day and have a plan B. But other than that?
I mean, sorry.
Please.
I'm going to be the one who is kind of a controvert here, but at the end of the day, you know, okay, there is overfishing in some species, but not on every species, thankfully, in the seafood industry. So either it's, like I said, we've got the aquaculture, the fisheries, and the wild, and at least for the business that I work for, we are in a wild industry, and we work in sustainability, and we have some species, in fact, that are not challenged with overfishing. And so it's not like everything it's doom and gloom. And in fact, you know, I just want to make sure, you know, we're getting away from this session and give a bit of a light versus the dark side of the difficulties that we're facing, but we're also having, regardless, plans, at least for some companies that are thinking ahead on sustainability and how we can fish and how we can maintain the jobs, the workforce and the resource, not only for now, for tomorrow, and for the future generations. And at least, for a company where I work for, Clearwater, we have 15 species, wide resource, 2,500 employees that, you know, raise families, generations, and not only we're talking diversity, but inclusion, but it's also it touches her daily lives, in fact. So it's more than just gender to me, in my opinion. So yeah, sustainability is key. Overfishing, it exists, but not everywhere. And there are plans, and sustainability is a key matter. Knowing that climate change of this has been raised, but and just to link it back to what you said, Bernice, you know, it's how we present the matter to the public, regardless it's private or the public sector, because to them, you know, they have other issues perceived more crucial, like the climate change, like the slavery, and some other topics that make our topic today less important. But yeah, to go back to diversification away from fishing, it happens. And it does exist within some companies. Sorry.
Maybe what we need to stress out here is that in the end of the day, we're not talking about greater inclusion or greater recording of female engagement in the fishing sector, but in all the economic activities. While you have women working in a sector that may be endangered, well, for instance, fishing, you can also have women being engaged in other sectors like sustainable environmental management or marine environment monitoring. So we just need to identify all these different areas and activities where women can have a vital role to play. And maybe this is a nice sentence to wrap this session, since it's already past our time. So many thanks, ladies. Jennifer, maybe I pass the ball to you to wrap up the session.
Oh, sure. Thanks, Stella. Yeah, again, thank you to everybody for the discussion and the interests. And I think just to pick up on this last bit of the conversation with maybe moving into different sectors, I think the key here really is whether it's within the fisheries and aquaculture sector or looking at women moving into other sectors, the key is that they're consulted and they're empowered to do this in a way that interests and benefits them the most. And I think that this is really the fundamental key of all of our work, is just ensuring that women are able to choose the path that they are going to follow. So thank you.
Great, thank you very much. I think we managed within the limited time that we had to shed some light on this very interesting topic of female inclusion and representation in the fishing sector. And hopefully we are leaving this session with more questions than answers. And this will give us the opportunity to meet again in the future and discuss more on this very interesting topic. So thank you all very much. Thank you to all the participants, the panelists, Jennifer. Enjoy the rest of the day. And once again, thank you very much for being with us. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much.